Games are the first educational technique human beings train their offspring with. The double meaning of the word game as play and game as trophy, conveys the function of games as a primary surviving training method. Since the 90s, edutainment, serious games, coach games, and games designed by educators and or students have entered the school world widely. This trend of digital gamification faced two different attitudes, one of opposition and another of sympathy and acceptance. The first position held that these games accustomed students to ludic stimuli led to distancing from physical reality and violence addiction. The second one welcomed digital games as a way to bridge the gap between digital immigrants and natives and foster effective learning. Although digital games have been thoroughly examined as learning environments, the examination of school space as a ludic one does not appear to receive equal attention. Is there potential for convergence so that a complex, dynamically interconnected educational space may arise? The need to discuss school in a ludic context comes from the consideration of the conflict between administrative and educational control, seen as a form of agon competition. In order to support our position that school space actually is a ludic space, we drew upon, firstly, Silence and Zimmerman's definition of game as a system. Building upon their definition, school can be seen as an artificially conflict-ridden system, man-made, defined by administrative and educational rules that results majorly in a quantifiable outcome measured by grades, reports and exams. Secondly, Huizinga's definition of the ludic magic circle. Education taking place in school can be considered as an act apart. In the secluded school environment, safeguarded by teachers, future citizens get educated while invasions from society's external environment are kept away. Thirdly, Goffman's frame analysis as adapted by Fine. In school, there are three layers of reality: the primary framework, the common sense understandings we have of reality; the second frame, which Fine calls the game context; and the third, inner frame of make-believe activities. These frames require responding roles: the individual as a role system, reality frame; the gamer role, game frame; and pretense, fictional roles, inner frame. The roles of teacher and student are thought to belong to the second frame and facilitate learning, whereas subject-related and context-based roles played in class belong to the third fantasy. When conflict cannot be regulated through positive play and contest, it breaks through in the form of violence. The consideration of violence as an extreme ludic form follows the paradigm of Nash's pyramid of leisure, according to which acts performed against society are classified as under zero leisure activities. According to a Greek study, the ludic dimension of school violence is recognized by a higher percentage of wiser, older students who state that violence is a game, whereas the percentage of younger students believing this drops significantly. School space hierarchy traditionally follows a pyramidal structure, with the playground at the base evolving to the hierarchy of the classrooms, with teaching staff rooms and the head's office on top. Nonetheless, the revolution of small smart devices and omnipresent mobile technology shook cognitive and spatial certainties. Just as students' knowledge of digital media technology surpasses that of their teachers and parents, school space hierarchy can be reconsidered. In the table you see, we examine the relationship between school space, time, and type of play, game. School space comprises subject-related and transit spaces. Subject-related spaces include classrooms, gyms, laboratories, playing fields, school theatres, design workshops, etc. Transit spaces include stairs, corridors, cafeterias, recreation rooms, bathrooms, and playground. Parallel to school space evolves subject-related and transit school time. The former is usually spent in subject-related spaces, the latter in transit spaces. The most relevant study we encountered that sheds light upon the connection between school space and violence took place at a US alternative school attended by children who have committed serious violations of school rules. As school violence, we define actions such as rough physical play that loses its sting, offensive touching, challenges, physical or non-verbal gestures, verbal teasing and insults, offensive requests, backbiting, accusations of wrongdoing, threats of physical harm, psychological or physical abuse, e.g. sexual, crimes, bullying and cyberbullying. Another layer of ludicity is added on top of school spaces and times, that offered by mobile technology. This ludic layer contains pervasive forms of digital violence with effects in the physical school world. Although subject-related spaces may host violent events, violence is expected to occur mostly in transit spaces, for example, corridors where there is little control over students. The same is expected about transit time, e.g. recess or when leaving school. But there are indications classroom violence may need to receive attention. Digital games are said to be allegories of space. Although space itself can be an enemy, we tend to move from oppressive dungeons and space stations to vast landscapes without clear perceptions and actions in advance. MMORPG spatial representations have been classified as A. Open landscape and closed labyrinths, and B. Zones of city, settlement, wilderness, and quest. Each zone affords particular configurations of actions. Cities or settlements are generally considered safe. Wild areas are transit routes to safeholds and quests. Quests, being spaces apart from actions, are areas dedicated to objective-driven gameplay. They can occur in cities, wilderness, or secluded areas of the wild, open air, or dungeon-like. Although the game worlds of MMORPGs are three-dimensional, they are usually accompanied by two-dimensional maps and some sort of inventory, a remediated version of the tabletop RPG's character sheet, in which character properties are managed and accessible during gameplay. As digital game violence, we define a series of actions taking place between players and/or characters. Physical violence in digital games represents physical violence and is keyed to the fictional world during gameplay. But verbal violence may occur between players and between characters. Such forms of violence include offensive requests, non-playful insults, verbal teasing, accusations of wrongdoing, threats of harm, and swearing. To this list, we may add verbal sexual abuse. In our MMORPG spatial analysis, as presented in the current table, Seth's and Oliver's digital game space categories are combined and approached in line with gameplay time phases and times of play game. World of Warcraft has been taken as an MMORPG paradigm. Role conventions, functional play, movement, and socializing as player and/or as character, metaplay, are common and possible at all spaces and during all phases of gameplay. They are not mentioned in the table, they are highlighted now instead. Now we will attempt to briefly examine the relationship between school and MMORPG spaces as sets for events of violence. Although in spatial terms The playground could be considered as belonging to the safe hold category. It is not safe at all, as forms of physical and verbal violence occur regularly. This is the reason we support safe holds corresponding to staff rooms, head's office, and maybe classrooms. Playgrounds, stairs, corridors and halls are transit spaces in between classes, so they can be considered as wilderness, either as open space and or closed labyrinths. The link between quests and doors, as well as their inherent experiential learning context, brings them close to subject-related spaces, e.g. classrooms, laboratories, library and the gym. The 2D nature of inventory map page evokes school marks and report pages given at the end of each semester and the end of the school year. There appears to be tremendous potential in discussing school and MMORPGs as correlating looting spaces and phenomena. With the boundaries of reality blurred by digital gaming's pervasiveness, a dynamic approach that takes into consideration the learning dimension of gaming as well as the ludic dimension of learning may explain otherwise incomprehensible cases of school violence and serve well in violence prevention management and strategic planning in terms of school management, curriculum and architecture. Digital RPGs are theatrical performative phenomena that may be integrated in drama classes. By combining digital MMORPG character animation and physical embodiment techniques familiar in drama, violence can be explored through empathetic and spectator routes, which may enrich students' violence prevention and management skills. Further research is needed for methodological convergence between school MMORPGs in accordance with the physical school and digital game space fusion. This new hybrid space emerging between the real and the virtual could be explored as the basis for fostering effective learning and behavior strategies through gaming. Thank you.